This story starts just before 1919, when a distillery company in Boston decided to build a gigantic tank in the north end of Boston. Now this tank is almost 6 stories high, had 11,000 tons of molasses inside of it. We're talking about 2.5 million gallons of molasses. Now the engineers specified exactly what they needed built, but it was handed to an accountant to finish the project. And in fact, this accountant, whose name was Gell, had never really built anything in his life and really couldn't read blueprints, but he saved the company a lot of money by getting the project done on time, but also by using less expensive metal and less expensive rivets than were called for by the original engineering specifications. Now, also, this was not well tested. Instead of filling the entire tank up with water to see if it was of good quality, given that there was plenty of product that needed the storage and the expense of water, Gell decided just to put 6 inches of water in a 6-story high tank and considered it good to go. So we fast forward about 4.5 years. Now the people of Boston weren't too happy. First of all, as you can see, this was quite an eyesore, but it also made noises, because as the metal expanded under the pressure, it would rumble and the ground would actually vibrate. But worst of all, people could see the actual molasses leaking from the seams. When approached with having to solve this problem, Gell, the accountant, had a simple fix. Why don't we just paint the tank brown to match the color of the leaking molasses? Of course, that wasn't a good solution. Now, the engineers were afraid this was going to really cause quite a mess in Boston, and a few of them would stay awake at night, sometimes just to watch, because they suspected there was going to be a serious problem, a leakage here. But they were wrong, but only in magnitude. Because on the day that you see, just after lunchtime, what we have is an explosion of this tank. It didn't just simply fail and spill. The sides of the tank exploded so that a couple 100 feet in most directions, the tank ruptured and left 6 stories of unsupported molasses to collapse among itself. So the accounts were that a wall of molasses 15 feet high raced through the streets of Boston, decimating a couple of blocks until that molasses leaked into the harbor. Now it happened to kill about 21 people and injure about 150 people. In fact, this was the first class action lawsuit in American history. So the reason why I share this story with folks thinking about disaster recovery is, well, this is a genuine disaster. But the parallels are impressive, because too many times today we find that when IT has an engineering solution to protect an organization, it has to be supported by accounting. And too many times we make those kinds of compromises, expense versus protection, as Gell made, to use less expensive materials than would have been adequate to support the organization. So one of the issues would be, can you test this environment also in DR? And too many times I see an equivalent to putting 6 inches of water in a 6-story high tank. I hear people that, yes, we've had a little bit of an issue, we've restored a file system, and it took us about a half a day. But if we look at their promises to the organization and say, we're going to restart this business in 24 hours, that's not a good indication that it took you a half a day to restore one file system. Also, we have to understand what's the business balance between this risk analysis. But today, with the kind of technologies that we can put together, using virtualization as an efficient method of protecting infrastructure and duplicating it from place to place, we find that the cost and complexity are dramatically reduced, making it much more palatable for business to say, this is the level of investment that we're comfortable with, the necessary level of protection that we need. So what I do is I challenge customers that I talk to. I tell them this story and tell them, look at the disaster that happened. What you see here took days and days to clear. Weeks later, they were still cleaning some of the streets of Boston, and for months, Boston Harbor ran brown with the sugar from this disaster. It was genuinely a huge disaster, which could have been avoided through better planning, adherence to engineering, and maybe a technology that was less expensive to own. But today, with the solutions that are available, we find that customers, when facing their decisions and ultimate compromises for disaster recovery, no longer have to find themselves just painting the tank brown.